أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you so much for joining us. This is episode 49 of our series Muhammad, the man who changed the world, and this is our penultimate episode. So we will have a bit of a long episode tonight, and inshallah the last episode will be episode 50, inshallah. And so where are we now? We are now in the 10th year of the Hijrah. So these are 10 years after the Hijrah. The Prophet ﷺ has been, he's 63 years of age, or just towards the end of his 62nd year of age. He has been preaching as a Nabi for the last 23 years, 13 years in Mecca and 10 years in Medina. As we mentioned in our last couple of episodes, that by now he's the undisputed leader of the Arabian Peninsula. Islam is the dominant religion of Arabia, and already Islam is moving into the regional powers, the Romans and the Persians. And as we mentioned, that the Nabi Sallam sent this major expedition northwards to Tabuk, and showed the strength of the Islamic State, and also basically separated the munafiqs from Islam. And so every single KPI, or every single objective you could have required of a leader has been achieved. The one thing the Prophet has not yet done, and this is really the crowning moment of his mission, is to perform Hajj. So Hajj, as we know, is the fifth pillar of Islam. And for all Muslims, it is usually the final of the five pillars that we do. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala requires from us these five pillars. And we all grow up, we revert to Islam, we say the Shahada, we perform our salahs, we fast in Ramadan, we give charity when we can. But Hajj remains that ultimate sort of final objective. And if you think about it from an individual perspective, that Allah requires us to do these five things. And when you do that, you have done everything required of you, and now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's His sort of prerogative now. It is that we be entered into Jannah. And a beautiful narration that gives us so much hope is that the Prophet ﷺ, Bedouin, comes to Nabi Sallam and says that I have done, he asks the Prophet ﷺ, what should I do? And the Prophet mentions the five pillars of Islam, and he says, I will do these five and nothing more. I will absolutely do these five and nothing more. And so the Prophet ﷺ, when the man left, he said, if he's truthful to what he says, then he will enter Jannah. So alhamdulillah, that this is what is required of us. And the Prophet ﷺ, now everybody is waiting, will he perform Hajj? When is he going to perform Hajj? Because he has conquered Mecca 2 years ago. The year he conquers Mecca, he does not announce a Hajj. The following year he announces that there's Hajj, but he's not going. Abu Bakr, you are in charge. And so everybody is waiting, will this be the year? And so the Prophet ﷺ, now he prepares to go on Hajj. And we narrate a long hadith by one of our favorite companions, Jabir, the same Jabir that we spoke about, Jabir and his sisters, and he married that older lady and his camel was lame and all that. We remember that story a few episodes ago. And then Jabir, who fed the Prophet ﷺ on the Battle of the Trench, and everybody came to his house, that same Jabir. And that's why so many hadith are narrated by Jabir, because he was so in awe of the Nabi Sallam, that he was close by him so often, and that's why he narrates many hadith. And he narrates one of the longest narrations about the Hajj of the Prophet ﷺ, because of the mother of hadith on Hajj. It's narrated in Sahih Muslim. And so Jabir is visited many years later when he's an old man. Jabir is an old man, in fact he's blind, and one of the great grandsons of the Nabi Sallam, his great grandson comes and he says, uncle, tell me about the Hajj of my grandfather. And Jabir touches this young man, Ahlul Bayt family of the Prophet ﷺ, and he says and now Jabir has this look on his face and he's nostalgic, like he's thinking about the good old days. And he says, the Nabi Sallam stayed with us in Medina for 9 years. He actually shows with his fingers, 9 years, and there was no Hajj. And during which time Hajj was not performed. Then in the 10th year, the Prophet makes a proclamation that I am performing Hajj this year. And so every Muslim was going for Hajj. This is the year we're going to go. And I think about it, subhanAllah, think about it, all of us, we have a time, inshallah we'll go for Hajj in 3, 4, 5 years. But if the Prophet ﷺ was here and he said, I'm going for Hajj this year, everybody would want to be part of that Hajj, to make Hajj with the Nabi Sallam. And so when he announced that he's performing Hajj, the people flocked to join him. And so Jabir mentions that the Prophet ﷺ, as we know from the rules of Hajj, you need to enter the state of Ihram at the miqat. And the Prophet, peace be upon him, was in Medina. The miqat for Ihram is basically next to Medina. And so the Prophet ﷺ leaves Medina at the beginning of the month of Dhul Hijjah, and he goes to the towards the end of the month of Dhul Qa'dah, and he goes to the miqat, and he enters the state of ihram, and he performs dhuhr salah, and then he gets on his camel, and he has the clothing of ihram on him, and he says labbaik Allahumma umrah or labbaik Allahumma hajj. He's going to enter the state of ihram. And Jabir says, I looked and I could only see people, thousands and tens of thousands of people. I looked all around and I could just see people. And I thought to myself, where are all these people coming from? Medina only has maybe 10, 15,000 people. There are over 100,000 people that have flocked to this place to join the Prophet ﷺ, and they all entered Ihram. And just as the Prophet enters Ihram, Jabir says, Abu Bakr rushes to the Nabi ﷺ, and he says that, Abu Bakr is saying that my wife has just gone into labor. She's given birth. She's just given birth at the miqat. Subhanallah. And the Prophet ﷺ says to Abu Bakr that she may also enter ihram. So the ladies, and he's teaching you, the Prophet is teaching us that even in their haid, their menses, they enter the state of ihram. They do everything as you would do. The menstruation does not prohibit, does not prevent being in ihram. And so she does everything as a normal person would do in ihram. She just bandages herself up. And then then Jabir says, at that time, our only knowledge of Hajj was that you enter the state of Ihram, you go to Makkah and you perform Hajj. We did not know that you could perform an Umrah with a Hajj. This would be a new rule which they would learn. And so the Prophet leads them from Medina all the way to Makkah. And when they arrive in Makkah, they perform an Umrah, a Tawaf. And he says, we went around the Kaaba 7 times. We then performed Salah behind the Maqam of Nabi Ibrahim. And then we performed 2 rak'ahs. And then we went to the Safa and Marwa. And the Prophet, and he's giving all the rules of Hajj here, that the Prophet recited, Inna Safa wal Marwa min sha'airillah. There's a verse in the Quran that verily Safa and Marwa of the signs of the sacred places of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that the Prophet ﷺ supplicated Allah, and at the end of his Umrah, when he had completed his Umrah, he says to the Sahaba that if I had known what I know now, so shows that Nabi doesn't know the future, that he is informed by Allah that if I knew what I know now, then I would not have brought my animals with me. And as for those who have not brought their animals with them, they may take off their ihram and treat it as an umrah. So what's going on? So the Prophet is saying to the Sahaba that we are in the state of ihram now. When you're in the state of ihram, for those of you who don't know, it's a very, very highly restrictive state. Ihram, haram, they mean the same. Haram means forbidden. Ihram, you're in this prohibitive state. When you're in ihram, you cannot have intercourse with your wife. In fact, you can't even be intimate. Even besides intercourse, you can't even have foreplay. You're not allowed to wear perfume. You're not allowed to cut your hair or trim your nails. You can't even, for a man, wear socks or put something on your head. Why? What are all these restrictions? When you're in this state, you realize Allah is teaching you that you are a servant and He is the Lord. When a person enters the state of ihram, the men in particular, they wear these 2 white clothes or 2 white towels. So what is this towels? That is the shroud that you wear. Every single person will wear this garment. Muslims, when you die, the day you die, your clothes are taken off you, your property is taken away from you, your wife becomes someone else's wife, your husband becomes someone else's husband, your wealth goes to your heirs, your body doesn't belong to you, and the only thing that you take with you are these most basic of shrouds. 3 or 5 or 7 cloths are wrapped around your body just to honor your nakedness, and you're placed in the ground. And so when you make Hajj, the person goes in that form. It is symbolic of the Day of Judgment, that you will stand before Allah when nothing belongs to you. Even your hair doesn't belong to you. That's why you can't pull it out, you can't trim your nails. And so this is the symbolism of ihram. So this state of ihram is very difficult. It's not an easy state. As the Prophet I'm saying to the Sahaba that Allah has made it easy for us, that we came to Makkah in the state of ihram, we are allowed to perform an umrah and then exit the ihram, and then we can relax for a couple of days, and when Hajj begins, we can enter ihram again. And for most people, who go on Hajj, you will arrive in Makkah 2, 3, sometimes even a month before Hajj, before the actual Hajj. If you entered Makkah in the state of ihram, which you must enter Makkah in the state of ihram, then you need to stay a whole month in ihram when Hajj begins. It's very difficult. And so he's saying that Allah has made easy and is allowed is given us an allowance, is given us a type of alleviation that you can come to Makkah in Ihram, perform an Umrah, exit your Ihram, and then for the remaining 2-3 weeks you are in the normal state. You can be intimate with your wife, you can enjoy yourself, and when Hajj begins you enter a new Ihram. So he says this now is a new rule. However, if you brought with you your animal to be sacrificed, if you came with an animal to be sacrificed with you, then you can't, because the Quran says you may only exit your Ihram when the animal that you brought is sacrificed. So part of the rituals of Hajj is to sacrifice an animal. And if you have that animal with you, then you are now locked in, and therefore you cannot exit Ihram until all the rituals have been made. But if you didn't bring your animal with you, then there's an expiation. And so the Prophet is saying that those who didn't bring their animals with them from Medina, so most of them didn't bring their animals, they came to Mecca and they would purchase animals there, as the Hujjaj of today. When we go from South Africa or America, we don't bring our animals, our goats, our sheep with us. We go to Saudi Arabia, and then in Mecca we purchase our animal and there it is slaughtered. So the same with the Sahaba. However, some actually brought their animals with them. And the Prophet ﷺ himself, he brought with him his sacrificial animals. And so he said, as for me, I need to stay in the state of Ihram. And anybody else who brought their animals, they should stay in the state of Ihram with me. But as for the rest of you, you may exit your Ihram. Now, and this type of Hajj is called Tamattu Hajj, which is the normal Hajj, which is encouraged, that this is how you should do it. The other Hajj which he made himself, the Prophet ﷺ, remains in Ihram the entire period. And perhaps Allah knows best, for the Prophet ﷺ, as we can see, he is harder on himself. And it's not that he didn't know these rules, but he himself is always choosing a more stricter version of the rules on himself, whereas his ummah, he's always making an allowance to make it easy, for an exception to make it easy for his ummah. As we know from the hadith of Aisha, she said, never did the Prophet ﷺ choose a path except the easier one for his ummah. He knew that this is going to be very difficult. Who of us can stay a month in Ihram? It's going to be super, super difficult. And so this is a very simple form of Hajj, whereas he took the much harder one. So the Sahaba said, we didn't know that this allowance was going to become only after we finished the Umrah. He said, exit Ihram, and inshallah you'll put in a new one. And one of the companions asked, Ya Rasulullah, is it just this year? Does this allowance, is it only applicable for this year? And the Prophet did this, no, until the end of time. This is how it's going to be forever. So then it's because the person asking Jabir was a descendant of Sayyidina Ali, a grandson of Sayyidina Ali. He tells a little tidbit here. He said, and your grandfather Ali, he didn't come with us from Yemen, from Medina. He came from Yemen. Ali was on a mission to Yemen, and so he came and he met us in Mecca, and he brought with him basically the army. Sayyidina Ali was in charge of an army, and he brought with him the army, and he brought animals as well to be sacrificed. And so when the Prophet asked Sayyidina Ali, what intention did you enter the state of Ihram? So Ali said, when I entered the state of Ihram, I said, I intend for whatever the Prophet is going to do. Whatever the Prophet is going to do, I'm going to do. And I brought with me my animals as well, like you did. And so the Prophet says to Ali, okay, you will remain in Ihram with me. You will remain in Ihram with me. Ali also, radiallahu anh, he goes and he finds his wife Fatima, the daughter of the Prophet. She's out of Ihram. She's wearing perfume. And he's like shocked. How can you be, A'udhu Billah, you're on Hajj. How are you not in Ihram? And she says, my dad, told us it's okay. And so Ali was a bit confused. He went to the Prophet, and the Prophet says to him, well, you unfortunately, not unfortunately, alhamdulillah for you, you have taken the same position as I have, and so you will stay with me in Ihram. But as for her, she didn't bring an animal with her, so she is allowed to continue. Also, when everybody went, this is not in Jabir's hadith, which is a side note, when everybody went for Umrah and they came back, the Prophet comes to Aisha and she's in tears, and he says to her, why are you crying? And he uses a nickname, Hanta, like sweetie, rosy, cutie. Why are you crying? And she says that I have my menses, and so therefore I can't go for Umrah. And for the ladies, it's not the Hajj class, but for the ladies, you can do everything in Hajj. You can be on Arafah, in Ihram, Jamarat, Sa'i. The only thing a lady cannot do on Hajj is Tawaf during her menses. Tawaf requires wudu, and so she can't perform Tawaf, and if you can't do Tawaf, you can't do the Umrah. So he said to her, the Prophet, it's like, placating her, and he says to her that this is the way Allah has created the daughters of Adam, and of course the reward is with you. You don't have to worry. You know, Allah will give you what you cannot do. Allah is not going to burden you. And so she's not happy, but she accepts the matter. And so she does not make the Umrah, and she therefore waits until Hajj. And when Hajj comes a few days later, this is now as we know from the rules of Hajj, the 8th day of Dhul Hijjah. The 8th day of the 12th month of the Hijri calendar is the beginning of Hajj, and it's called the day of Tarwiyah, which is the day of preparation. So Jabir continues. Then on the 8th day, obviously the people who were not in Ihram, they entered the state of Ihram. Those who were already in Ihram just continued, like the Prophet ﷺ, like Ali, like Aisha, because Aisha also remained in Ihram. They continued in their Ihram until the 8th day. So from when they arrived till now, and he says that everybody we came to Mina. So on the 8th day, people leave Mecca and they go to Mina. And the Prophet ﷺ, having put the people then thereafter towards Mina, and the people have put on the Ihram for Hajj, and the Prophet, he rode and he prayed the Dhuhr prayer, the Asr prayer, Maghrib, Isha, and then he went to sleep and he woke up and he performed Fajr. And so when you go to Mina on the 8th day, you perform all 5 salahs at Mina, and there's no other, you don't do anything else, you just get to Mina, you relax there for the day, you perform your 5 daily salahs, and the 4, Dhuhr, Asr and Isha, are made to 2, shortened. This is the rule of Hajj. And so of the next day, this is the 9th day of the Hijjah, and the 9th day of Hajj is the most important day of Hajj. This is the day you go from Mina to Arafah. And on that, so we're explaining as if there was a Hajj class, and many of you who've been on Hajj, you will fondly remember these events. For those who have not been, I hope this inspires you to go on Hajj. And it's alhamdulillah something that every Muslim inshallah would do. So on the 9th day of Dhul Hijjah, this is the 2nd day of Hajj. After Mina, you wake up in the morning from Mina, you perform Fajr, and then you leave. And so after Jabir is saying that he performed the dawn prayer, and then after he waited until sunrise. So after the sun had fully risen, it's now early morning. He gave the orders that a tent should be placed should be set up for him just outside Arafah. Now, what is Arafah? If you want to understand Hajj, it's very simple. Hajj is like the whole journey of Hajj is like a straight line. On the one end you have Makkah. You then move from Makkah to Mina. And then you move from, or actually I should say, nowadays people go to a place called Azizia, which is between Mina and Makkah. So you've got Makkah, you have Azizia, you have Mina. At Mina is where Nabi Ibrahim was meant to slaughter Nabi Ismail, and that's where the Jamarat is. Then from Azizia, from Mina rather, you move to Muzdalifah, and then from Muzdalifah there's a long not long, we're talking about maybe a half an hour walk, if it's no crowds, from Muzdalifah to another place called Arafah, and Arafah is the end of this circuit, and Arafah is this open barren land, and people will stay there the 9th day of the Hijjah, the afternoon they will stay there, and it is symbolic of the day of Qiyamah. And so now the Prophet is going to move from Mina through Muzdalifah to Arafah. This is what you do on the 9th day of Dhul Hijjah. So Jabir says that the Prophet woke up, performed Fajr Salah on the 9th day. He told someone to go and set a tent for him outside of Arafah. And then Allah's Messenger, he left from Mina and he moved towards Arafah. And between Arafah and Mina, there's a place called Al-Mash'ar al-Haram, where the Quraysh used to have a special spot, and they would stay there, and this was only for the Quraysh, a very elitist place. The people of Mecca, they got to stay at Mash'ar al-Haram. The rest of you sinful Hajjis, you need to go your own way. This was an elite place. And Jabir says, the Quraysh did not, they were almost certain that he would also stop at Al-Mash'ar al-Haram, like they did. However, the Prophet did not stop. He completely disregarded their practice of Jahiliyyah, no elitism, and he followed with the whole, normal, ordinary folk, and he walked all the way just to the point of Arafah. And he arrives at Arafah before noon, before Dhuhr, and he stops. So Arafah is his destination, and he gets to the border and he stops. He doesn't enter Arafah. And why? Why is he doing this? He's showing the Muslims that at this time is when Arafah begins. And so before Dhuhr, Arafah is not yet is not yet, the time of Arafah has not started. We call it wukuf. The standing at Arafah has not begun. It only begins after the word. And so he dismounted and waited. And when the sun had passed the meridian, he got on his camel to be he brought his camel was brought to him, and then he saddled and he rode into the valley of Arafah. So he now rode into the valley of Arafah. And once he was in the valley of Arafah, he gave an amazing speech. He stood before the people and he gave a sermon. So this is now noon, just after noon. On the 9th day, he enters this very sacred place, this valley, where 100,000+ people are standing, and now he gives his, perhaps what it's called his final sermon, but it's not his final sermon, but this would be his most the largest group of people he's ever addressed in his life. And he asked them, what day is this today? And they say, it is the day of Arafah. In what month is this? And say, it's Dhul Hijjah. In what place is this? This is Arafah, this is Mecca. And so he said, the most sacred day of the most sacred month, of the most sacred place, so too is the sanctity of every life, and the property of every person is sacred. Just as you deem this place and this month and this land and this time as sacred, you respect all these things, the life and the property of every person must be respected by one another, like the sacredness of this place. And then the Prophet continues in his speech, everything pertaining to the age of Jahiliyyah has been abolished completely. It's under my feet. And all the claims of blood vengeances. So the Quraysh had this thing that I have a blood feud with you. You killed one of ours. We have a scorecard. One day I'll kill one of yours. When you least expect it, I'll kill one of your kids or one of your wives. So he says, this blood vengeance is finished. It is of Jahiliyyah and I have abolished it. Nobody can hold blood vengeance over another person. And he says, the first of those murdered amongst us, whose blood vengeance I will abolish, is the son of Rabi'ah. So it's one of his own family members. So he begins by his own family. My tribe, I will abolish our blood vengeance to begin with. So and then he says the name, and he mentions the names of people who were killed, and he says this blood vengeance is over. Then he says the interest of Jahiliyyah, the taking of interest, money interest, is abolished. Today it is haram. There is no more interest. And the first interest that I'm going to abolish is the interest owed to my uncle Al-Abbas. My uncle Al-Abbas, who's owed money, all the interest owed to him is abolished. Everybody who owes him interest is abolished. But obviously the capital remains. Then he says, the Prophet continues, show fear towards Allah regarding your women, for you have taken them under Allah's protection and for the security and the trust of Allah, and you have the right to be intimate with them through the command of Allah. You have no rights over your wife except that you took a nikah, a contract of marriage in the sight of Allah, and so it is incumbent upon you that you obey them, so that you treat them well, and that you show them kindness. You are responsible for providing for them with food and clothing in a fitting manner. And then he continues and he says, I have left among you something that if you hold on to it, you'll never go astray. The word of Allah, the book of Allah. If you hold on to the Quran, you'll never go astray. And he mentions that the shaitan has all but given up hope of bringing you back to the worship of idols. Shaitan has now finally accepted that to make the Muslims go back to the worshipping of idols, especially to this group of people, the Sahaba, is not going to happen. But he will try his best to mislead you in smaller things. And of course, the shedding of blood in particular. And then he concludes and he said, he continues as well, and he says that no Arab is superior to a non-Arab. And no black person is superior to a white person, and no white person is superior to a black person. That all of us come from one man and one woman. All of us come from Adam, and Adam comes from clay. So these are part of the statements he made. And then he concludes and he says, if Allah were to ask you about me, what will you say? If Allah were to question you about me, what will you say? And they reply, we testify that you have بلغ الرسالة, you conveyed the message, وأدى الأمانة, and you fulfilled your obligation, and you نصح الأمة, and you gave advised your ummah, you led your people. And then the Prophet raised up his fingers and he says, Oh Allah, bear witness, oh Allah, bear witness what they're saying. 100,000 witnesses have confirmed that I gave the message of Allah. I have done my job. I've done my part as a messenger. His job is to convey the message. Oh Allah, I have done my part. And he said to the Sahaba, convey what you heard here to those who did not hear. So spread my speech onwards, and may those after, may they understand as well. And then the Prophet says to Bilal, his muadhin, call the call to pray, and he prayed Dhuhr 2 rakahs, and then he prayed Asr 2 rakahs together, and then he found a spot. Jabir said he basically found a spot and turned his back, and from, let's say, 1:30 the afternoon all the way to sunset, for the next 5-6 hours, he just stayed in that position, and he spent the entire day supplicating Allah. Now this is the highest, the side note, Arafah we know is the highlight, the pinnacle of Hajj. And at that place of Arafah, there are no rituals. Prayer is even made short. There are no, there's no tawaf, there's no sa'i, there's no jamarat, there's no ritual, there's no sacrifice there. So what do you do on this day at that place? It is a place simply for you to have a one-on-one conversation with your Lord. We know in other hadith where the Prophet says, Arafah is the day the Lord of the universe descends in a manner which we cannot understand to the people of Arafah, and He is close to them. And whatever they ask of Him, He grants. Whatever sin they beseech, He forgives. And so this is the closest a person can possibly be to Allah, is on the plains of Arafah on the 9th day of the Hijjah, when you're in the state of Ihram and you as a pilgrim. That is, if you want to, give an analogy, and there's no analogy for Allah, it is a private meeting in your calendar, on your Google calendar, where you and Allah have a one-on-one meeting. And for most Muslims, you only experience this once in your life. And it is a final preparation for when you meet Allah in person on the Day of Judgment. And so the Prophet ﷺ just basically stands in this spot, and he is making dua very intensely. And as the sun becomes low and it's about to set, he raises his hands and he is very intense in his worship, and he's praying to Allah for his ummah. He's praying to Allah for Allah's mercy and Allah's kindness, and he faces the Qibla. And finally, the sun sets on the plains of Arafah. And for anyone who's been there, you would know this moment is a deeply emotional moment. And one really feels the closest you are to your Lord is on that day, on that place, just you and Allah, just you and your Lord. There's nothing else. Even though you are surrounded by millions and millions of people, everything sort of fades away, and you're taken to this sort of other world where you are speaking to your Lord. And everyone there is also doing the same. Everyone has their own sins they are repenting for, their own suffering or difficulties that they're asking Allah for. Everybody wanting to attain Jannah, everybody wanting forgiveness, everybody praying for relatives who have passed away, who relatives are not there. And so everyone who's been on that place, and that is why for the Muslims, you are required to do this once in your life, and once is enough. The hadith says, those who leave the plains of Arafah, they leave as if though they have been birthed anew. Your entire life begins over. All your sins are forgiven. Everybody who leaves Arafah leaves, inshaAllah, sinless. And so the Prophet faced, as Jabir continues, the Prophet faced the Qibla, and he remained standing till sunset. And when the yellow light had gone and the disk of the sun had disappeared, so now it's Maghrib time, he now got up and he got to his camel, and he took Usama. Who's Usama? Usama is the son of Zayd, like the grandson of the Prophet. He took Usama and he told Usama to sit behind him. How lucky for Usama. Usama is sharing a camel with the Prophet ﷺ. And he went towards Muzdalifah. In another hadith, he went slowly. He was pulling the camel back. And he told the people, slow down. Don't take it easy. Go at a very relaxed pace. Don't rush. And because they were going so slow, Usama said, the time of Maghrib is going out, Ya Rasulullah. We haven't made Maghrib yet. It's almost Isha. And the Prophet says, don't worry, we'll make Maghrib and Isha together at Muzdalifah. And so when he arrived, so remember, I told you there's this sort of circuit, Makkah, Azizia, Mina, Muzdalifah and Arafah. So now they're coming all the way back from Arafah to Muzdalifah. And so in the evening, they arrive in Muzdalifah, and the Prophet ﷺ prayed Maghrib and Isha, and then he slept. He didn't stay the whole night in prayer. He didn't make tahajjud as was normal. He slept. And again, showing the ummah, easy. Don't be hard on yourself. You just came with this very spiritually high moment of Arafah, so now you go and sleep. And then he then lay down till dawn, till Fajr, and he prayed Fajr Salah with an adhan and iqamah, and then he stayed there in Muzdalifah until the light, the sun had come up. He then got on his camel and he came. And of course, during this time, he's making ibadat and then mentioning the greatness of Allah. And also, this will be the 10th day of the Dhul Hijjah for the whole world. This is the day of Eid now. This is the day of the second Eid of Islam, the Eid of sacrifice. And he then went quickly before the sun rose. And now he takes a different person, joins him on the camel, taking Al-Fadl, who was his cousin, Al-Abbas. The same Al-Abbas whose interest was cancelled, the Prophet's uncle. This is Al-Fadl, his son. So a cousin to the Prophet, a first cousin. And so he puts Al-Fadl on the camel with him, and together they are riding from Muzdalifah basically to Mina. And also in another hadith, Jabir doesn't mention, but another hadith, a lady comes to the Prophet, and she was the narrator of the hadith says, such a sweet, beautiful looking lady. She was really, really a gorgeous looking lady. And so she's coming to talk to the Prophet. Al-Fadl is with him on the camel, and Al-Fadl could not help but stare at this lady. And the Prophet just politely shifts Al-Fadl's face away. And then he looks again, and the Prophet just shifts his face away. He doesn't rebuke him, doesn't shout at him. This is in Hajj. Just after the day of Arafah, you're in Ihram. He doesn't say any of this. The narrator says, he just pushes Al-Fadl's face away, and Al-Fadl looks again, and he pushes his face away, and then 2-3 times. And this lady, what did she come? She basically said, Ya Rasulullah, perform Hajj. My dad is too weak, too old to perform Hajj, so should I perform Hajj on his behalf? And the Prophet says, yes, it's fine, and basically answers her question. Meanwhile, Al-Fadl can't control his gaze, but the Prophet does not rebuke him and just pushes his face away kindly, very gently. And so the camel continues with Al-Fadl behind and the Prophet in front, and they go all the way to Mina. And here at Mina, he urged the camel a little bit, he moved a little fast. And Jabir is saying he got to the biggest jamarat. So in Mina, there are 3 sort of pillars where you stone them. Now, these 3 pillars, what are these 3 pillars, and why are we stoning these 3 pillars? If we remember all the way back, we spoke about Nabi Ibrahim. Nabi Ibrahim was commanded to slaughter his son Ismail, and he brought him to Mina. And before he slaughtered his son, the devil Iblis appeared in different forms. First to Ismail, saying to Ismail, run away, your dad is crazy. Then he went to the wife of Nabi Ibrahim, Hajar, and said, your husband is crazy, he's going to kill your son. How do you allow him? And then he came to Nabi Ibrahim and said, Ibrahim, are you crazy? Your Lord has gone mad. How can you slaughter your son? And every time he tried to mislead them, they picked up stones and they pelted Iblis, and he fled. And so we emulate that. This is not the Iblis that we all know as Muslims. Those are just stones. Ibrahim's pelted the Iblis. Is not that we are pelting it now, but it's symbolic that when we cast the Jamarat, it is us also rejecting shaitan, rejecting sin, rejecting his way of life, and obeying Allah. When we pelt, we say, Allah, you are greater, you are the greatest. And so Jabir says that one of the rites of Hajj is to throw small stones. He came to the Jamarat and he threw the pebbles, 7 pebbles at one of the Jamarat, the big one, and he mentions very clearly a small stone. And so again, just reminding us, Jabir is teaching, as the Prophet had taught, when we throw Jamarat, we don't take a boulder and we don't go crazy. Something small, it's all symbolic. And so he threw them from the valley. Then after he had pelted the Jamarat, one of the Jamarat, and then he had 63 camels, and he's 63 years old. He had 63 camels brought to him, and he personally slaughtered all 63. But in total he had 100 camels. So he slaughtered 63 with his own hand, and the remaining 37, he told Ali radiallahu anh, slaughter the remaining 37. And then the meat of the animals obviously goes to charity, but some of it may be kept in Hajj. And so he had meat from each of the camels, a small piece from each of the animals brought to him in a type of a soup, and he ate from it and he shared with the other people. And then he had his hair shaven. and he basically put on new clothes, and then he got onto his camel, and then he moved on to Mecca. So Arafah, Muzdalifah, Mina. Here he slaughters the animals and pelts the jamarat in Mina, and now he moves on back to Mecca, where he performs another tawaf. And when he gets to Mecca, he's performing the tawaf, and he sees his family, the Banu Hashim, they are giving out water, Zamzam water, to the pilgrims. Now, this was a job before Islam. Each family of the Quraysh had a certain job during Hajj. Some of the family members were in charge of the cloak of the Kaaba. Some were in charge of the key of the Kaaba. Some were in charge of the housing of the Hajjis. And some were in charge of giving water. And it was the family of the Prophet ﷺ, his own family, whose job was to go in and get water for the pilgrims and then hand it out to them. And when he comes and he sees his cousins and his nephews, they are all in the well bringing water, giving it out, he says, how I wish I would, if I could, I would be with you in there. I would also draw water and be giving it out to the people like that. However, if I were to do it, then the whole ummah would take this as a type of ritual. If I were to do this now, then it would become a ritual of Hajj, and everybody would want to hand out water. And so, to make life easy for his ummah, he does not participate. It also shows you the wisdom of the Nabi Sallam. Even when he was on Arafah and he'd given his sermon, when he was done, he said, I'm standing here on this spot, but all of Arafah is Arafah. Meaning, this place I'm standing is not holier than the place next to it. So don't all of you try to clamor in here. I must stand somewhere. And so this plot is Arafah. During Hajj, a few of the verses of the Quran were revealed. Perhaps when the Prophet ﷺ was completing the rituals of Hajj, one of the most profound verses of the Quran, when a rabbi heard this, he said to Umar many years later that you have a verse in the Quran that if we had a similar verse in the Old Testament, we would have taken it as a day of celebration. What is that verse? It is the verse where Allah says, "Al-yawma akmaltu lakum dinakum wa atmamtu alaykum ni'mati wa raditu lakum al-islam dina." He said, this day, Allah proclaims that this day I have perfected the religion for you. This day, the religion is now perfect. And I completed my favor upon you, and I have chosen Islam as your way of life. Islam is the way of life for you. So it is as if Allah is concluding that the matter, your religion after Hajj is now complete. Your entire religion is now complete. And so after the Prophet ﷺ had completed the rituals of Hajj, he remained in Mecca for another few days, and on the 18th of Dhul-Hijjah is now about 5 days after he had completed his Hajj. He got ready and he returned to Medina. He finished up Hajj and now he's going back to Medina. And just on the day he leaves, interesting, Aisha once again, he visits her and she's crying. He says, why are you crying? And she says, it's so sad that everybody got an Umrah and a Hajj and I only got one Hajj. Everybody said, remember, she couldn't do the Umrah like everybody else. And she said, everybody did Umrah and Hajj. I only got a Hajj. And again, he's trying to pacify and tell her that it's okay, it's not your fault. But she says, I can't accept it. I want to do an extra Umrah. And so he says, okay, Aisha, if that's what you want. He calls her brother. He says to Aisha's brother, take your sister to a place outside of Mecca. Let her enter a second ihram. So remember, to perform an Umrah, you need to be in the state of ihram. But you're in Mecca, what do you do now? So the people who are in Mecca, when they want to perform Umrah, they leave Mecca, a few kilometers outside of Mecca, and then they enter a state of ihram. They don't go all the way to the miqat. So they enter ihram, and today there is a mosque there, and it's called Masjid Aisha. And this is the place where people living in Mecca, or those coming to Mecca and they want to perform a second or third Umrah, where do they enter ihram? They go to Masjid Aisha. So we follow the sunnah of our mother Aisha, and we enter ihram there outside of Mecca. It's a short stop outside of Mecca, and then we come back in and we perform Umrah. And so she performs Umrah, and then she joins up with the group, and they all carry back to Medina. And one last little point that happened on this journey before they arrived back in Medina, just on the way, they stopped at a well, the well of Ghudair Khum, very famous place. They stopped at a place called Ghudair Khum. And here the Prophet ﷺ makes another very important speech. And in it, he praises, he talks about He says again, I've left behind two things that you need to be very careful about: the Quran, the word of Allah, and my family. And I command you to respect my family, and I command you to be obedient to my family, and I command you to be good to my family. And then he says, whoever takes me as his Mawla, as his leader, then Ali is your Mawla, is your leader. Now, what's the context of this? What's the context of this? A lot of discussion is around this event. Did the Prophet ﷺ at this moment appoint Sayyidina Ali as a successor to him, appoint him as sort of the crown prince? After I go, Ali is the next in line. There's some, sects of Islam who believe so, whereas the vast majority of the ummah says no. What is the context of this speech? Why did the Prophet ﷺ stop at this place and after Hajj mention this thing? So remember, Sayyidina Ali came with an army from Yemen. And this army was a little upset with Sayyidina Ali at the way he had handled things. Sayyidina Ali was a very, in their mind, he was a bit harsh towards them. That they wanted, so after they had done the battle, they had gathered the spoils of war, they wanted to, if you could say, they wanted to be paid their wages. And Ali said, no, none of you will get paid until I take this to the Prophet ﷺ and he himself will hand over to you. I'm not going to give a person a cent of it. And some of those soldiers, their clothing was literally falling apart, it had holes in it, and so they felt, but I'm due like my share, and so they took some of the clothing without permission. When Sayyidina Ali saw them wearing new clothing, he said, where did you get this clothing from? You're not supposed to take it. And he forced them to strip down and take on their clothes. So this really upset them, and so they come back to the Prophet ﷺ. Now remember, they were coming from Yemen, they meet up with the Muslims in Mecca, and now they complain to the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet ﷺ is saying to them, look, leave Ali. Ali is a bit strict. Ali his only concern is to do the right thing. And also it's Hajj time now, guys. The thing is, the matter is over. It's Hajj. And so everybody did Hajj. After Hajj, they come back and they continue to complain about Ali. They continue to mention him in a bad way. And the Prophet ﷺ really gets upset. And so now he stops and he says to the army, but to everybody, that if you respect me at all, then respect Sayyidina Ali, respect Ali. Ali is from me and I am from Ali. That Ali and I are like one. And so he is just reminding the companions, and it's not all, when we talk about Abu Bakr and Umar, these were a group of people that came from Yemen, some of the soldiers, reminding them that this is what's important, is that do not disrespect Sayyidina Ali. And he says a similar thing about other companions as well, that do not disrespect my Sahaba, that if you were to spend the world in charity, you won't even come a handspan close to them. And so then the Prophet ﷺ proceeds to Medina, and he arrives in Medina in the middle of, towards the end of the month of the Hijjah, the 12th month of the 10th year of the Hijrah. The Prophet ﷺ is really only less than 100 days away from his passing away. And inshallah, in the next episode, we'll talk about the final 100 days of the life of the Prophet ﷺ, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.